In the previous video, I talked about why it's easier to achieve financial freedom in Canada than here in the Netherlands. But in this video, I want to tell you why I actually prefer to live here in the Netherlands than in Canada when it comes to simple living. Hi, my name is Andrew. I left the corporate grind after a burnout and achieved financial freedom in the most anticlimactic way. Join me as I share my journey towards simple living and discover how you too can live a fulfilling and financially sustainable life. There's more than one way to go home. So I've been here in the Netherlands several times now to visit my partner, and every time I'm allowed to stay for 90 days. And then after that, I would have to go back to Canada to do the whole cool down thing for another 90 days before I can come back for another 3 months. And that's just the limitation of my Canadian passport in the Schengen area, which the Netherlands is a part of. And if you add up all the times that I've been here in the country, it's about a year or so. So I've been here long enough to kind of get a good idea of what lifestyle is like here, what's living here is like. And I'm starting to really appreciate the culture, the environment, and a lot of the things that Netherlands has to offer. And I find that it really aligns with my value of simple living a simple life when compared to Canada. And I've lived in Canada for well over 20 years now in a couple of cities around the country from east to west. And I've also explored different cities and towns as well, and also the nature that Canada has. So I kind of want to share my opinion and my observations about why I feel that I would prefer to live here in the Netherlands than in Canada. And to be honest, I think this is a very subjective opinion, especially if you're in a different period in your life. Depending on your age and your situation, you might want different things. As for me, I've lived in Toronto for over 10 years, 11 years now, and I'm just really tired of the hustle and bustle culture of Toronto. So I'm really appreciating that simple, quiet, calm, peaceful kind of lifestyle. And while I haven't lived in big cities like Amsterdam, we do live in a smaller village near one of the larger cities. So maybe there's some form of bias here. So do take my opinion with a grain of salt, but I just wanted to tell you my experience so far and why I like it here so much. So the first thing I really like about the Netherlands is the people and the culture. So let's start with the people. I've had the opportunity to meet Gijs's friends, his sister's friends, his colleagues, and every single time when we have a conversation, it's always about me as an individual and not about my title. So in Canada, it's very common to, when you meet someone, one of the very first conversation starter is, what do you do for work? Because in a very competitive environment like Toronto, I think the job title really makes people stand out, especially like the higher you are in the corporate ladder, the more people would value your words and would want to network with you. So there's this kind of like a hierarchical thing that's kind of like invisible, but then it's there. Whereas here, when you start a conversation with people that I've encountered with, they're really genuinely interested in my experience in the Netherlands so far, what I enjoy about the country, how me and Gijs met. And it just feels so relaxing because I can be me and not the senior software engineer, you know? And I really appreciate that. And I think when it comes to work and titles, people here actually values a good work-life balance where people are encouraged to prioritize taking their vacation days. And they get quite a bit here too. So I think maybe it's because of that mindset of like prioritizing life and work-life balance over climbing that corporate ladder and job titles is what makes the people here more interested in people rather than their titles. Another thing that I really appreciate about the people here and also part of the culture is how the kids are raised. So as you may or may not know, the bike culture here in the Netherlands is probably one of the best, if not the best in the world. Because the biking infrastructure and bike paths, it's everywhere here. And I love that. And it's not uncommon to see children riding their bicycles everywhere by themselves. from village to village to different places. And I'm always so impressed by that because not only are they being independent, they're being responsible, doing exercise, which is good for their health. Another thing about how the kids are raised here that I observed is that it seems that a lot of the kids here learn how to swim at a very young age. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, wow, that's such a good thing to do for the kid because like swimming and cycling is one of the essential skills in life, and it's a very beneficial thing for their health as well. Like for example, I didn't learn how to ride a bicycle until recently, which has been life-changing for me because it's so good for my health, good for the environment, saves me money because I don't have to pay for transit or car. But the thing with Canada and I guess North America in general is that the infrastructure isn't really designed for bicycles. They prioritize cars over bicycles. So that's a whole different story. But I'm getting a little off topic here. Going back to how kids are raised here, one of the core cultural values is do normal, which means that you're encouraged to be normal, act normal, and just fit in rather than standing out. So kids here at school, they tend to be encouraged to just do good enough, try their best, and that's good enough. And I really like that because it removes the unnecessary stress on the kids' youth so that they can develop towards being happy rather than being someone that can achieve high grades. And I think this is like an overall cultural thing, which leads me to the next point is that I notice families and people here, at least the ones that I've encountered, are so modest. There's no excessive showcase of wealth. When you go into their homes, it's so simple and organized. Back home in Canada, I feel like no matter where you go, advertisements, people on the streets, sometimes you visit people's homes, like there's this showcase of wealth and branding and excessiveness that makes me go, is that necessary? And I don't really see that here, but just imagine like simple houses of simple things inside and it's just clean and simple. And I love that. And it goes back to the whole do normal mentality. They're not trying to stand out. They're just trying to fit in and be normal like everyone else. And I just love that. Another thing about the people here, which you may or may not have heard of, is the Dutch directness. I've actually observed that. And to be honest, I really appreciate that because talking to people, I don't have to second guess what their intentions are. I don't have to play the mind games or sugarcoating things that I actually want to say to express my feelings. And this is not to say that you can be an ass and to be a bad person. I think there's a difference between being honest, direct, and in a very respectful way than being an ass. And I think for better or for worse, depending on who you ask, the directness is quite a good thing because it is so efficient in communication. And in a way, it trains people to be responsible for their feelings because it's hard to control what people say, but it's much more important to develop our ability on how to respond, react, or not about what other people say. And I really like that. When it comes to the environment, I find that there's a lot of green spaces here. And coming from Toronto, where it's a concrete jungle, it's such a change in environment, and I just love how things are here. And I know what you may be thinking, like, yeah, Canada, that's a lot of green space. I think the impression when you think about Canada is that there's a lot of green space, nature, mountains. Well, that's true, but having lived in both Calgary and Toronto and traveled to many of the places in Canada, there's a lot more highways than you would think. Whereas here, even if you're driving through neighborhoods, there's so many trees and greenery to be seen. And this whole culture of having bike paths everywhere and easily bikeable places, it makes enjoying the green space a lot more than having to drive through highways and highways to get to some naturey place in Canada. Even when it comes to nature and trees, I think there's so much intentionality put into thinking about how trees are planted, because when you're driving through villages and towns, even on the highway, you can see how they're evenly spaced out, and it just gives this sense of organization and thoughtfulness and intentionality towards it. And as someone that has OCD, it's like heaven. Everything just feels so much more organized and well thought out. And it's these tiny little things that add up here and there, and the entire experience just so much better. And like last weekend, we went to Kokenhof, which is this tulip garden place for tourists like myself. And even the parking spots are so well organized, and there are people there directing which lane you should go in. And it's similar to when we went to Efteling last year. It was similar. It was so well organized and so efficient. And of course, this isn't something that happens everywhere, but it's all these tiny little things that add up to create a much more enjoyable environment. Another thing I really like about the Netherlands is the food and groceries. So at the grocery store, it's so efficient. A couple of things that are quite different between here and Canada is that we get these scanners that we can scan our own products, and then at the checkout, it makes it so much faster. And if you don't use the scanners, the cashiers, they scan so fast. Every time it's like an Olympic sport, no joke. And one of the things that I really like about the grocery stores is that every single one of them have this bottle machines where you can go and return the bottles to get your bottle deposit back. I felt like that was such a good way to encourage people to recycle and to bring back of all these plastic bottles, which is great for the environment and also in a way penalizes people who don't recycle them. Now, when it comes to food, I think that with every culture, there are unhealthy options, and the Dutch culture is no different. There's things like bitterballen or kibbeling, frikandel. Those are stuff that I love to eat, but they're not super healthy, and you probably shouldn't be eating them every day anyways. But when you go to the grocery store and look at the daily staples, what I really appreciate is that it's so affordable to eat healthy. And especially if you're vegetarian or vegan, there are so many options. So for example, this bag of salad is, I think it was like €39 or something. And that's regular price. And we also have these vegan options. I'm not making these tonight, but I just want to show you. They're really inexpensive. They're like less than €2 each. So this is like vegan meatballs, and these are vegan, not going to try to pronounce that, but they're kind of like ground meat. If you were to buy those in Canada, they'd be at least $5, $6, $7 for a pack. And for whatever reason, in North America, these non-meat alternatives are marketed as a premium product, whereas here it's just for everyone, and it's so accessible, and I love that. And when it comes to simple living and the grocery store here in the Netherlands, one thing that you might notice is the limited option per product. You're not faced with 20 different types of milks or 10 brands of frozen pizzas. Everywhere you go, you get a handful of selection, and oftentimes it's just 2 or 3 kinds to choose from. And I really appreciate that. The simpler it is, the less I have to use my brain, because at the end of the day, I just want milk or juice or whatever. It doesn't have to be all these fancy added vitamins and this and that, and you know what I mean. And some of the typical Dutch food include AVG, which stands for aardappels, vlees, and groente, which is potatoes, meat, and some veggies, as well as the famous cheese sandwich that a lot of people had for lunch. And these foods, sometimes people think, oh, it's so basic, it's so bland, it's so simple. But that is the point. It's simple, it's efficient, and it's healthy, which goes back to the whole simple living thing. A lot of times we think that we need a lot to be happy in life. We need to enhance this with this and that. But at the end of the day, what we need is the simple things. What we need isn't more of this illusion of choices. I think going back to the simpler things and the basic things, perhaps that's what happiness might be. That's why I like the Dutch culture so much. It's so down to earth, non-pretentious, simple, and basic in a very good way.